911 call is very, very hard to listen to. There was this 76-year-old woman named Loretta Pickard. She had just underwent hip surgery, so she really couldn't move. So she was technically disabled. And on this day, her husband was out with their grandchildren. So it was just her home alone. And out of nowhere, she wakes up to the smell of smoke. And since she's disabled, she can't really go see what it is. So she grabs her phone and then she calls 911.
No, bro. If this is exactly what I think it is.
Okay, these questions are not going to delay paramedics in any way. Is anyone trapped inside the building?
Well, I'm inside the house. I don't even know if I can get out.
Okay.
Was that her coughing?
Yeah, she's coughing. Bro, her house is being filled with smoke.
It sounds like it's getting a little bit harder for her to breathe.
This back and forth goes on for 15 minutes, bro. With obviously the operator continuing to say, don't worry, there's help coming. Meanwhile, nobody's coming,
Nobody's really coming.
They're here. They're there. I'm letting them know exactly what's going on, okay?
Come in here. I'm inside.
Okay.
And for the remainder of the call, all you hear is,
Hello? I'm staying right here.
Oh my goodness, bro.
the most fucked up part about this whole thing, the firefighters were literally outside the house while she was still alive.
At least 3 aircraft have been hijacked in the United States. 2 of which were hijacked in the New York area, and they were driven into the World Trade Center towers.
It always really interests me when I come across a piece of 9/11 related media that I've never seen before. Just like this picture I recently saw of the Twin Towers just 2 hours before the attacks began on 9/11/2001. This photo is just incredibly eerie and I couldn't believe I'd never seen it. I had also never seen this photograph taken from another plane on 9/11 after both of the towers had been hit. I can't imagine the chilling feeling that the passengers that took these photos must have felt when they learned exactly what had gone on that day. And it's something that I've thought about before, but I'd never seen a video of or any evidence of what it was like for other people that were actually on planes on 9/11. Like how they dealt with what was going on, how they told them the information. And I can't imagine how frightening it must have been to hear that information being broadcast across the PA system on a plane on 9/11. I'm going to play you a little bit more of that clip because I just think it's really interesting.
Hijacked airplane, and that was blown up and destroyed out over the ocean. Let's see, 4th item here. The Pentagon was attacked with a helicopter loaded with explosives, and there's no damage estimates right now. Also, we've had other reports of the White House being attacked, and currently they're reporting that
Who the hell are guys then?
they're reporting now that there's smoke coming out of the White House, but no further details.
This woman broke her husband out of prison with a helicopter. Nadine Vouger was no ordinary partner. She was devoted to her husband Michael Vouger, a career criminal serving time for armed robbery and attempted murder. So much so that she spent months secretly learning to fly a helicopter, planning a daring rescue that seemed straight from an action film. Armed with nothing but her determination, Nadine hijacked a helicopter and set her sights on one of the most fortified prisons in France. As she approached, guards scrambled, unsure if they were witnessing a rescue mission or an impending attack. Against all odds, Nadine landed the helicopter in the middle of the prison courtyard. Michael, already prepared, climbed onto the helicopter with a makeshift ladder. Every second felt like an eternity as guards closed in on them. The couple barely escaped as guards opened fire, their bullets missing them by inches. The helicopter blades kicked up a storm of dust and debris, blinding the guards and allowing the helicopter to disappear into the horizon. Nadine and Michael's love story was as dangerous as it was daring. But their freedom was short-lived. Michael was shot in the head months later and became disabled, and she was arrested. Their story remains one of the most mind-blowing prison breaks in history, fueled by love and sheer audacity.
fact that you can murder your own child and only get 25 years is insane to me. I'm talking about this man right here, Christopher Greger, and how he forced his 6-year-old son to run at such high speeds on a treadmill that he died from it. This happened in 2021, but the trial for this case just took place, and it revealed some awful things, like a video taken from the gym at Christopher's apartment complex showing the abuse. In April of 2021, 6-year-old Corey Mitchell was staying with his dad Christopher at his home in Stafford Township, New Jersey. At the time, Christopher and Corey's mom Brianna were not together and they didn't live together, but they shared custody of him. Brianna didn't want him to go to Christopher's house because she suspected that he was being severely abused by him. For a quick backstory, Christopher met Brianna when she was only 15 and he was 21, so he already wasn't a good person. Now at the time, she had more than enough evidence to suspect that little Corey was being abused, and she even reported this to authorities more than 100 times over a span of 18 months, but nothing was ever done. Just 5 days before his death, Corey's grandma on his mom's side was giving him a bath and saw that he was covered in bruises, some that were fresh and others that were trying to heal. Corey then asked his grandma, quote, "Does God see what my daddy does to me?" In which she replied, "God sees everything." Corey then asked, quote, "Why doesn't he help me?" That same day, he wrote, "I died" in chalk near the front door of the house. His grandma says that Corey knew nobody could help him and that he knew he was going to die and accepted it. Fast forward 5 days, which is the day that he was taken to his dad's house. Corey's grandma gave him her cell phone and told him to hide it and to call her, not if, but when his dad starts beating him. Corey told her that his dad was always around and couldn't use the phone or even run to a neighbor's house. Corey died that day, and what's incredibly tragic are the events that led up to his death, which you'll see in the next video, so just a heads up. Just before he died, video footage from the gym at Christopher's apartment complex showed him forcing Corey to run on the treadmill. He kept increasing the speed, which made Corey fall off at least 6 times. And at one point, Christopher is seen biting Corey's head out of anger. Corey went into cardiac arrest twice, so Christopher took him to the hospital where he died just an hour later. The autopsy says that Corey died from blunt force trauma and lacerations to his heart and liver. And all of this came as a result from his dad's abuse. Just 20 minutes after Corey died, Christopher took off and drove to Arkansas, and the only reason he came back is because his parents talked him into it. What's sickening is the fact that he didn't even tell Corey's mom Brianna which hospital he took him to, so she couldn't even spend the final moments with her own son. Christopher wasn't arrested until a year after his son's death. During the trial, it was argued that he inflicted those blunt force injuries to punish Corey because his mom was 14 hours late dropping him off. He was recently found guilty of manslaughter and the endangerment of a child. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for manslaughter and 5 years for child endangerment. Right before sentencing, he said that although his actions are inexcusable, he still denies any responsibility for his son's death. He said he thought Corey was just tired and that's why he didn't take him to the hospital sooner. Prosecutors wanted him to have the max sentence, which would have been 40 years. But the judge said that because of his limited criminal history, he was ineligible for that. According to New Jersey law, he's required to serve at least 85% of his sentence before being considered for parole. What's so infuriating is the fact that just one day before Corey was murdered, Brianna took him to the doctor so that they could document that he was being abused. She did this because shortly before his death, she filed for an emergency application for full custody because of the abuse, but she was denied. She was denied partly for her past with drug addiction, but she had gotten clean for Corey and was doing everything she could to try and help him, but nobody would, and now it's too late. Corey deserved better.
They were supposed to be going Christmas shopping, but when her boyfriend never showed up to pick her up, things escalated into like something from a horror film. It was the 30th of November 2016 in Derby. Daniel Seggi was 31 years old. He worked in a care home in Mikolova and was actually a fan of Derby County Football Club. He lived with his dad, Jeff Seggi, who was 59 years old, and the pair both had regular contact with Daniel's mum and also his younger brother. To anyone who saw Daniel out and about that day, it wouldn't seem like anything was amiss. He was doing very normal things. He went to the bank and then he went to pick up a Chinese takeaway. However, Daniel's circumstances were far from normal. Daniel was dating mum of 2, Zoe. They'd known each other for years and gradually their friendship had developed into a relationship. Zoe described him as caring and said he was really good with her 2 boys. On the day in question, he picked up his Chinese takeaway and then was texting back and forth with Zoe and arranging to go Christmas shopping the following day. He arranged to collect her at 10 AM and the next day he sent her a text to say he was on the way, but he never showed up. Now obviously Zoe was a bit confused and also worried about where he could be. She started texting him asking where he was, but her texts weren't delivering and his phone was going straight to answer phone. As the day dragged on, she was just getting more and more concerned about the whereabouts of her boyfriend, so she ended up driving to his house. What she found at the property stunned her. The house was completely taped off by police. It was quite clearly a crime scene. Officers were stood around the home and were kind of reluctant to tell her what was going on. The only thing they could tell her was that they had found a body. Rumours were flying around the neighbourhood as to who this body could be. Nobody knew whether this was an accident or something more sinister had happened. It transpired that there had been a murder, and the victim was Daniel's dad, Jeff. He'd been absolutely brutally attacked. He'd been stabbed over 60 times and also hit with a hammer over 20 times. Now, Jeff's wife had actually been the one to contact police initially. She'd been trying to contact Jeff, as I said, although they were divorced, they were actually still quite close and did speak regularly. She'd been unable to get hold of him, and Jeff was very much a man of routine, so if he said he was going to do something, he definitely did, and he usually did the same kind of thing at the same time every day. He usually rang his son and attended work with him, actually. They worked together, so it was strange that they hadn't heard from him in 2 days. She rang the police and asked them to do a welfare check, which they did, and when they showed up to the property, they ended up having to break down the door, and they found the horrific murder scene. It was described as a complete bloodbath. Jeff lay on his bed deceased. There was evidence that Jeff had bravely tried to fight off his attacker before he passed away. With Daniel missing, officers had no idea whether Daniel was actually a suspect in this case or he had potentially also been attacked or murdered and had gone missing himself. One clue came from the fact that Jeff's car was missing, so they started thinking, could Daniel have fled in his dad's vehicle? Then Daniel got in contact with Zoe. He told her he'd been to A&E and he was quite jovial and jokey in his text. He'd apparently sustained a cut on his finger at work and he said he'd had to have stitches and described himself as a brave soldier. Police knew they needed to track him down. His story wasn't adding up. ANPR actually helped officers to track Daniel driving his dad's car as they suspected. He then had ditched the car in a car park in Cardiff. He frustratingly turned his phone off then, which made it really difficult to trace him. However, they scoured CCTV and did actually track him down at the Cardiff train station. Then he messaged Zoe. The message said, "I honestly don't know what's happening. My heart is broken, but also my mind. I have no idea what has happened this past week. It's like I've been asleep for a week and woken up in a nightmare. I'm so scared and confused. I honestly don't know what to do. All I want to do is hug you. I love you and the boys forever. Never forget that. You are not just my girlfriend, you're my best friend and I love you." Now Zoe actually replied, kind of comforting him and asking him where he was. Police desperately needed to get his location so they could go and arrest him. He replied 24 hours later stating, "I really want to see you too, but I can't. I'm so far away and can't remember how I got here. I have no money to get home, my wallet is gone and I'm all alone. I wish I was with you, I'm so sorry." He eventually told her he was in Glasgow when Zoe offered to pick him up. It transpired that on the day that he was murdered, Jeff had come back from work and got ready to go to bed. At around 10 p.m, he was attacked by Daniel as he was getting into bed. Daniel then casually went to pick up a Chinese takeaway, then made his way to A&E for the cut on his hand at around 2 a.m. The following day, he'd withdrawn £100 from his dad's bank account, gone and got a McDonald's, went to the bank to withdraw more money, and then went on the run. Chillingly, he was captured grinning on CCTV. He eventually pleaded guilty and showed absolutely zero emotion as he was sentenced to life. He hasn't revealed the reason he killed his dad, and he was given a minimum of 20 years.
Recently on Netflix, a movie got released called Leave the World Behind. What that movie's about is somebody basically was cyber attacking the United States by hacking the satellites. So we had no service, no form of communication, no form of navigation. And then the people inside the United States will eventually turn on each other and kill themselves and start a civil war like that.
What the high key? That's not out of the realm of possibility, bro.
And to add more, that movie was directed and co-directed by Barack Obama and Michelle Obama.
Correction, there were actually executive producers through their film company.
And
recently,
whoa, what the? So now the whole conspiracy and why it's a little bit more scary
is that this
just released
and now all this happening,
like if it was
a warning.
A warning, bro.
Because I was just about to say, I could have sworn I seen like a couple of TikToks before talking about a cyber attack.
Yeah, that's kind of scary, bro.
Because remember last year with the whole train situation and the movie that came out on Netflix?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know, bro. It's scary, bro, because it's like, how do you even prepare for that, you know? Like,
you
could stock up on all the food you can and shit like that, but like...
Once the internet is gone, bro, then...
But like, when time comes, bro, shit is like a different story. Also, like how rich people have bunkers and shit, which I know is definitely true, bro. Like, I mean, the most disturbing movies. It was also low-key banned, and it took a long time for it to like fully release because of how controversial and disturbing the movie was.
Okay.
The Poughkeepsie tapes. It's a mockumentary of a serial killer, and it's just a bunch of found footage, specifically with all of his victims.
No, pop it.
What?
Pop it! What is your name? My name is Sam. What is your name, Sam?
And throughout the whole movie, it goes back from like an interview to the detectives, sheriffs, and also the actual Poughkeepsie tapes revolving how he killed, tortured, and mentally abused his victims and shit. The very first tape that it shows is one of the very first victims in the movie, which was a 8-year-old little girl.
I don't remember that at all, bro. What?
You see the serial killer starts talking to the little girl, kind of knocks her out, and then he starts dragging her into the car, and obviously
takes her. Yeah.
One of the most disturbing parts, the serial killer kills a couple, and at the end of the clip you see how he had decapitated the boyfriend and sewed the head onto the stomach of the girlfriend. The other one was obviously Cheryl Dempsey, kept in there for mad long. At the end of the movie was mentally damaged and shit. She had like Stockholm syndrome, basically trying to say that this whole time her abuser loved her and stuff.
He loved me. Nobody ever lets me say it, but it's true. He didn't mean to leave me, and someday he's gonna come back to me.
Imagine taking a holiday photo only to discover in the background was a dead body. A YouTuber's boyfriend joked this is what murder episodes are made of. He didn't realise just how accurate he was. Travel vlogger Sarah Funk has over 282,000 subscribers on YouTube. Back in 2007, she was on holiday in Cyprus with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend Lewis took a beautiful photo of her at the Mitsiro Red Lake. Now, at first glance, you might think that the lake looks kind of creepy due to the fact that it's red. The water in the lake turns red due to acid and gives it a really eerie feel. However, there's another reason that this is a really eerie area. Lewis and Sarah discussed this on a vlog clip when Lewis said this is what murder episodes are made of. As the video cut to a close-up of a suitcase in the lake, Sarah said, "I just feel like death is in the air." Now, they couldn't have been more accurate. What appears to be a suitcase was floating in the lake. 2 years after the trip, the pair were forced to come to terms with the fact that this was a lot more creepy than they'd even imagined. They had to come to the realization of what might have been inside that suitcase. An army captain from Cyprus admitted to killing 2 children and 5 women. The serial killer told officers he had indeed disposed of some of the bodies in the lake. 2 of his victims' bodies were found in suitcases in the lake that Sarah was at.
Disturbing videos that I've seen in a long time.
Wait, there's a video to this?
Multiple videos to this, bro. Just so you guys can see how everything is and just get a grasp of what I'm gonna get into.
Along with this, cooperate with this. We'll be as nice as we can to you within the limits of keeping you prisoners. If you don't go along with this, they'll probably take you into bed, tie you down, rape you, shoot you and dry.
The woman in that video, her name is Kathleen Allen, one of many victims of the dual serial killers Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Very, very infamous serial killers in California. They had this obsession with having... So they would capture their victims, they would torture them, SA them, and then murder them in this cabin that Leonard Lake built and put VHS cameras on every single room, so obviously he could record all the torture, everything that they would go through. 12 victims. It's confirmed 12. Some people say it could have been 25 victims. He also recorded a manifesto in his bunker, which I'm gonna show you right now, which is obviously also very, very disturbing because he tells you why he's doing it, what's he gonna do.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October.
That's Lake?
Yep.
This tape, what you're hearing now, is going to be the lead-in, the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use the woman, and when I'm tired or satiated.
Joanna Lopez broadcast. This was some real life analog horror that happened on American TV on January 14th, 1989. Channel 5 NBC, Chicago. They were airing the regular Saturday programming, showing like a bunch of segments like PSA segments. Following that would be the US national anthem. And remember, 24/7 TV wasn't a thing during this time. So the TV station would sign off at a certain time, leaving just the color bar screen until the broadcast picked up again in the morning. Instead of it showing like the regular, like it showed a picture instead. It showed a missing person. Instead of it just being for a couple minutes, it was there until in the morning.
Reminds me of like the
Selene Delgado. Yeah, exactly. Whenever I saw this, bro.
Channel 5 too, right?
Yeah.
That's mad creepy, bro.
What made it more creepy was the fact that how it looks distorted, not really like a clear picture.
It's very, very dark.
2 years later, it happened again, but it was for only a few seconds. That was it. But
so who is Joanna Lopez?
They couldn't find shit about her, bro. There was no police reports, nothing. People were coming up with theories, conspiracies. The number, it was connected to the youth department of the Chicago police.
I was just about to say we should call the number.
Call it, fuck it.
Star 67 though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Bro, what's gonna happen, bro?
I don't know.
Alright, I'm muting myself.
People came up with another theory that she's connected to another person. Have you ever heard about these sisters? People call them Las Boquianchis. And actually, the show, Mujeres Asesinas, made an episode about them. And it wasn't necessarily called that, but it was called Las Cotuchas.
I remember that show, bro.
For those who don't know, who aren't familiar with Spanish shows and stuff like that, but it was basically a show that depicted real life cases, and sometimes no, but it would be about a woman turned into like a
killer.
They were 4 sisters: Carmen, Delfina, Maria de Jesus, and Luisa. The oldest sister, Carmen, and Delfina ended up opening this bar. It also doubled up as a brothel, a place where men could just go and see prostitutes and stuff like that. The way they would get their prostitutes is they would go to these rural areas, mainly in the states of Jalisco, Guanajuato, and Michoacan, where they would find the prettiest girls, which unfortunately ended up being 10 to 15-year-olds. They will sell them this dream: if you come work with us, we'll offer you a job as a waitress or a maid, and you'll be working in the city, getting a bunch of money. And of course, since this is like the 1950s, they would want to go because they've dreamt about stuff like this. And in some cases, if they didn't want to go, they would just kidnap the girls, and the prettiest girls were set aside for special customers who paid the highest prices. When the girls would become sick or they no longer were liked by other customers, they would be killed by either starving to death, or other girls would go and beat them with a stick. If girls got pregnant, they would either sell the baby or they would kill the baby. It wasn't until when one of the girls, she ended up escaping the police ended up raiding the bar, and they found at least 91 bodies mixed with either.
This selfie captures the train that is just about to hit and kill these 3 girls. It was October 2011 in Utah. Savannah Webster posted a Facebook status saying, "Standing right by a train, this is awesome." It would be her last ever Facebook status. The 13-year-old was at the railway tracks with her older sister Kelsey, aged 15, and her friend Essa Ricker. The trio decided to take a selfie with a train heading towards them. It's believed that they weren't actually aware of the oncoming train at the time. They were completely unaware of the danger that they were actually in. In the top of the photo, you can see the train headlights as the train hurtles towards them. The train driver actually blew the horn to try and get the girls to jump out of the way, but it was tragically too late. It was also impossible to stop the train at that point. Even emergency brakes on trains can take quite a long time to actually stop the vehicle, just due to the weight of the train and the speed that it's going. The girls were hit at approximately 39 miles an hour. When the train finally stopped, the driver of the train jumped out and ran up the tracks towards where the girls had been. He wanted to see if by a miracle any of them were alive. Now, Savannah was actually making a little bit of noise, so they called an ambulance right away and she was rushed to hospital. Although she was alive at the time that she went to the hospital, she was put on life support, and her family had to make the heartbreaking decision to turn off her life support machine, just due to the extent of her brain injuries. The other 2 girls were killed instantly.
Just when you thought this situation couldn't get any worse, it does. On Monday, some of the grand jury documents were released from Epstein's Florida case. And it shows that the prosecutors in Florida knew that Epstein had assaulted minors years before. And then they cut a deal with him that basically let him walk out scot-free. Now, this is a shock because grand jury testimony is usually very secret, and it's stuff that they don't typically unseal. And this investigation took place in 2006. So this shows that authorities knew in 2006 that Epstein had been assaulting minors. And then they let him go. And it wouldn't be another 13 years until he was finally arrested again and then took his own life. All these documents just go to show that Epstein really was given a free pass. All the people in power, all of the rich friends that he had, they all conspired and agreed to let Epstein run whatever ring he wanted to. And if you really study this case, you know that Epstein was connected to the government. There's no doubt in my mind. And these grand jury documents kind of prove it. I mean, how do you have someone who's accused of raping multiple minors get a sweetheart deal, where he's essentially given a slap on the wrist and shown his way out of the building? Oh yeah, if you cater to the rich and powerful, that's how you get a deal like that. The more and more we learn about Epstein, the more people are waking up, but the full truth of this whole thing will never be admitted to. But if you want to be a part of the solution, head to EpsteinJustice.com, sign their petition demanding justice for the victims of Epstein, and send a letter on their website to your member of Congress. This organization wants a body in government to investigate these sex rings and actually honestly, truthfully investigate them and give the people, the American people, the real answers that we deserve.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is one of the most disturbing recent cases I've come across. This woman was forced to have an arranged marriage and then her husband murdered her in front of her children. Suma Begum was forced to marry Aminan Rahman in 2019. They got married in an arranged ceremony that took place over the phone. There was actually a big age gap between the pair. She was 20 and he was 40. The pair ended up living in South London and having 2 children. Now, Suma wasn't happy with her husband though, and she really wanted to leave. There were reports that she wanted to run away, but just felt like she couldn't. She felt completely trapped and started talking to another man online. They got very close and would talk on video calls. On the 29th of April 2023, things would come to a dramatic conclusion. Suma was on the video call with the man that she'd been speaking to. Now, he lived in the United Arab Emirates. While they were on the video call and in front of their 2 horrified children, Aminan lunged at her. She tried to run, but he grabbed her by the throat. Now, Suma's boyfriend, who was on the video call at the time, obviously saw what was going on. He witnessed the vicious attack and reported that Aminan grabbed Suma and he could hear screaming in the background. Now, the screen actually froze at this point. A short while later, Aminan came back onto the screen and told the man, "Look, I have killed her and now you get ready." CCTV captured a horrifying image of him carrying his wife's dead body out of the apartment in a suitcase whilst holding one of their children. Suma's boyfriend, Shahin, recorded an online video of the ordeal and gave it to authorities. Aminan was arrested and the suitcase was found washed up on a riverbank. He had dumped it in the River Thames. Aminan tried to claim that he killed his wife because she threatened to kill one of their children. This was obviously proved to be a lie. At his trial, he was found guilty of murder and he will be sentenced at the end of July 2024.
How we run things here.
This is Dr. Disrespect, real name Herschel Beam, and in recent days he's been exposed as being a pedophile. So I don't really follow game culture too closely, but I know that Dr. Disrespect is one of the biggest names in gaming right now. And he's been at it for years. This guy has been a celebrity in that world. But back in 2020, he was banned from the streaming platform Twitch. But he never exactly stated why he had been banned from Twitch. It was just this big mysterious thing that got glossed over. But recently people started talking about this ban again, but they had no idea what was coming next. On June 24th, the gaming studio that Dr. Disrespect co-founded fired him. Then on July 25th, he tweeted this infamous tweet, where he admits in the tweet that he was knowingly messaging a minor, and that these messages with the minor leaned in the direction of being inappropriate. Basically just coming out and admitting, yes, I am a pedophile, but in the same tweet, he says, I'm not going anywhere. This is all the past. It also should be noted that he kept editing out that line individual minor from individual to individual minor, taking out the word minor. But yeah, this is just the worst thing you could have possibly done in this situation. Then more allegations came out. Allegations from a woman named Lena Love. Lena claimed that Dr. Disrespect offered her a partnership in exchange for free cam shows. She then gave him these private shows and he blocked her. A recent Rolling Stone article also provided some more information on this and claims that Herschel Beam actually continued sending this minor graphic, schmexual content even after he learned from her that she was a minor. We don't even know all this story yet, but I'm sure it's only going to get worse and worse. And I think that he is finally getting all the disrespect that he's always asked for. Join me as I expose pedophile rings and corruption in my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there's some really important information in these shows that people need to know.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
The fact that this was the last person that 11-year-old Audrey Cunningham saw before she was killed is horrific. On the morning of February 15th, Audrey disappeared while on her way to the bus stop in Livingston, Texas. She was last seen at around 7 that morning, and the last person that she was with was 42-year-old Don Stephen McDougall. Don was a family friend of the Cunninghams who lived in a trailer behind their home, and he would occasionally walk Audrey to the bus stop or even take her to school if she missed the bus. Audrey lived with her dad, her grandparents, and a few other family members on that same property as Don. After she failed to show up to school and after missing the bus, Audrey was reported missing by school officials, and a massive search was launched. Very early on, Don was really vocal about being innocent, and he made it a point to join in on the search efforts for the little girl. He was seen going to multiple houses in the community, knocking on doors and asking if anybody had seen her. He even reportedly took to Facebook, commenting on posts about Audrey being missing, saying things like, quote, "I'm not guilty." But just one day after Audrey was reported missing, Don was arrested on an unrelated assault charge, and according to police, he immediately became a person of interest in Audrey's disappearance. The following day, police found Audrey's backpack near the Lake Livingston Dam, and it was at this point that they started investigating Don's cell phone data and local surveillance footage to piece together 3 different locations of interest, which included the Trinity River just 10 miles from Audrey's home. And sadly, on February 20th, 5 days after she disappeared, a dive team found Audrey's body in the Trinity River under the US Highway 59 bridge in Livingston. She was found underwater, tied to a large rock with rope that was linked back to similar rope that was found in Don's car. Her cause of death is still undetermined pending autopsy, but police do believe that she was murdered the same day that she disappeared. Don was still in jail when Audrey's body was found. He has since been charged with capital murder and is now being held without bond. This is so upsetting for many reasons, but the main reason is because Don has a very lengthy criminal history dating all the way back to the early 2000s. In 2008 alone, Don was convicted on 2 child enticement charges. This is the definition of that for anyone wondering, and for those charges, he was sentenced to 2 years, yet he was released early. And on top of that, for some reason, he wasn't required to register as a sex offender. Multiple people that knew Don, including a former boss and a coworker, said that he was a really bad person. He threatened to kill his old boss over $50 and tried to stab his old coworker after he slashed all of his tires. Don's most recent conviction was a harassment charge in 2020 in which he spent a week in jail for. According to police, Audrey's dad was reportedly aware that Don had a criminal background, but that he didn't know about the former charges involving children. Multiple different people let Audrey down. This is not the outcome that anybody was hoping for, but hopefully now Don will be charged accordingly and there will be some justice for Audrey.
This disturbing case of the freeway phantom killer remains unsolved. In 1971, Washington, D.C. was experiencing its first ever serial killer. In April that year, 13-year-old Carol Spinks was walking to a local shop to get some food for her family. After purchasing dinner, she headed home, but she would disappear on the short walk back. Tragically, the young girl's body was discovered 6 days later. She'd been SA'd and strangled to death. However, this would not be the last tragic killing that the community would experience. Just 2 months later, another body was found. The victim was discovered in exactly the same spot that Carol was found in. This was right next to the freeway. Locals were terrified of the so-called freeway killer. The killer then made a terrifying move that no one was expecting. The third victim was Brenda Crockett. She was only 10 years old, and again she'd gone to the shops for food and never returned home. This time, however, her family received a terrifying phone call. Now, Brenda's mum had realised she'd vanished and she'd gone out looking for her. While she did, the phone rang. Brenda's younger sister was actually inside and she took the phone call. Her sister told her that she was in Virginia and a man had snatched her. Then there was another call half an hour later. Brenda asked, "Did my mother see me?" Then she whispered, "Well, I'll see you." The phone hung up and Brenda was found deceased a day later. In October, 12-year-old Nenemoshia Yates vanished on her way home from the shops. A mere 2 hours later, her body was found by a passerby. Again, something was coming that nobody expected from this killer. 16-year-old Brenda Woodard disappeared. This time when her body was found, there was a note in the pocket. The note was actually written in Brenda's handwriting. This led police to believe that the killer dictated the note and Brenda wrote it. It says, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can," and it's signed the Freeway Phantom. Now things went quiet and the community thought that they were finally safe. However, 10 months later, 17-year-old Diane Williams was killed. This time the killer callously phoned her parents and said, "I killed your daughter." Police were initially suspicious of Robert Askins. He'd actually been imprisoned for another murder. When they searched his property, they found photos of girls and a knife. Now, he wasn't actually convicted of any of the freeway killings. He was, however, imprisoned for kidnapping and SAing other girls. Shockingly, in 2009, police admitted that they lost the entire case file. This is including potential DNA evidence. There still remains a $150,000 reward for information. You'll never guess the clever way that this victim of a serial killer helped police catch him. Richard Evanitz's dad was a sadistic and aggressive man. Richard seemed to inherit this behaviour. When he was a child, he was so violent that he even choked his sister to the point where she actually passed out. When Richard moved out, he was arrested for exposing himself to 2 children. Now, he was only given a fine for this, and he would later go on to begin a horrifying crime spree in Virginia. In June 1995, he broke into the home of a 13-year-old girl. He took a gun with him and used the weapon to gain control over her as he SA'd her. A year later, he kidnapped 16-year-old Sophia Silva. She'd been doing her homework in her front garden when he snatched her. Horrifically, shortly after, her body was discovered in a swamp nearby. Another year passed before he would strike again. He abducted 2 sisters, again from their front garden. The girls were 12 and 15, and tragically their bodies were discovered in the South Anna River. Using fibers from the 2 crime scenes, police were able to link the cases together. In 1999, Richard moved back to his hometown, and a few years later he would strike again. This time, however, he set his sights on Cara Robinson. This would be the beginning of the end for Richard. Cara was only 15 years old, and Richard spotted her watering flowers outside her friend's house. He approached her and kidnapped her at gunpoint. He stuffed her into a storage container and drove away. However, Cara was a very clever girl, and she actually memorized the serial number of the box that she was trapped in. Meanwhile, her parents reported her missing, but police dismissed her as just a runaway. Luckily, Cara took matters into her own hands. Cara endured 18 hours of grueling SAs from Richard, but she knew she had to get him on side if she was to survive. She decided to clean for him and chat to him as if he were a friend. She also memorized information from the post that was scattered around his apartment. As she was tidying up, she was making a mental note of everything around her. At bedtime, despite being handcuffed to his bed, she managed to escape and get out of the window while he was still asleep. She spotted a car and ran to it, begging for help. The driver immediately took her to the police station. Thankfully, using all of the information that Cara had discovered, they managed to track Richard down. However, when they got to his house, he'd actually vanished. He fled to a motel in Florida, rang his sister, and confessed to what he'd done. Luckily, she did the right thing and called police. When officers arrived, there was a massive car chase. Richard ended up driving 120 miles an hour the wrong way through incoming traffic. When police cornered Richard, he grabbed a gun and shot himself in the head.
We need to talk about the strange disappearance of Angie Pena. I recently made a video about Nancy Ng, a woman who went missing during a yoga retreat to Guatemala in October. But from that video, I got so many comments and messages from people saying how similar Nancy's case is to Angie's, so I decided to look into it. This is Angie Pena. She went missing on January 1st, 2022. She was last seen jet skiing away from a beach off the coast of Roatan in Honduras, but she never came back. Witnesses state that she was last seen in the West Bay area on her jet ski, but when she failed to come back, she was reported missing. At first, authorities believed that she drifted off into the water and ultimately drowned, but her body never surfaced. A search was conducted by the Belize Coast Guard, and a few days later, Angie's jet ski, her life jacket, and one of her earrings were found what appeared to be washed up on a beach in Belize. But Angie herself was never found, and then came a shocking discovery a few months later in August, and this is where things start to get strange. While many people believed at first that this was an accidental drowning, behind the scenes, police were investigating Angie's disappearance as something much more sinister. On August 29, 2022, Honduran authorities raided 5 properties, one of which was an apartment owned by Gary Lee Johnston, a 63-year-old American living on the Caribbean resort island of Roatan. Information that authorities collected led them to search Gary's home, but they didn't find Angie. Instead, they found a young girl. Some reports say she was 12 and others say she was 17, being held in the home. Upon searching the home, authorities found more than 30 cell phones containing pictures and videos of Gary engaging in sexual activity with multiple minors. Along with that, authorities also found one of Angie's earrings and the swimsuit she was wearing the day she went missing in his home. Also found at the scene were videos directly linking Gary to Angie. According to authorities, they found overwhelming witness, documental, and technological evidence connecting Gary to Angie's disappearance. But they also said that he did not act alone and that he's believed to be part of an international network or a human trafficking gang that's currently being investigated. At the time of Angie's disappearance, Gary was believed to have been living in Roatan for 6 years. He owned a condo building and was reportedly not widely known in the community. He was also one of the founders of an Arizona tech consulting company called IT Partners, which was established in 2004. After his arrest, the CEO of the company released this statement. Pause to read if you need to. Honduran authorities collected a lot of evidence from potential crime scenes, and they've gone on to say that from what they've collected, they can raise the possibility of recovering Angie alive. As of the most recent article, authorities strongly believe that Angie could still be alive and is possibly a victim of human trafficking. Most of the articles about Angie's disappearance are in Spanish, so I've had to rely on Google Translate. But from what I've gathered, Gary is still detained and has since been charged with possession of CP and his possible involvement in human trafficking. It will soon be 2 years since Angie disappeared, and with the evidence found, we need to find her fast. If you have any information at all, please contact the number on the screen. Nancy is also still missing, and both women deserve justice and for people to come forward and do the right thing. How do you not know that your 3 friends have been dead in your backyard for 3 days? And why would you not call the police? Everyone should be talking about this case because it's insane. On Sunday, January 7th, these 3 men went to their friend's house in Kansas City, Missouri to watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game. The men were Ricky Johnson, David Harrington, and Clayton McGeeney, and the house that they went to watch the game was being rented by their friend Jordan Willis. That was the last time that anyone ever heard from these men. After days of not being able to contact them, Clayton's fiance went to Jordan's home on the 5200 block of Northwest 83rd Terrace in Northland, and it was there that she discovered all of the men's cars still parked in the driveway, including Clayton's. After knocking on the door but receiving no answer, she eventually broke into the basement of the home, and she began loudly calling out for Jordan and announcing that she was there, but still she got no answer. After going further into the house, she discovered a dead body outside on the back porch, and she then called the Kansas City police. This all happened at around 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. When authorities arrived, they discovered 2 more dead bodies outside in the backyard, and unfortunately, they all belonged to Ricky, David, and Clayton. But this is where the story starts to get odd. It was only after police arrived that the resident of the home and the men's friend Jordan came out of a bedroom. But he reportedly came out really calm in his boxers and holding an empty wine glass as if nothing was wrong. Jordan then told police and later his family that it seems as though his friend simply froze to death, yet he never once called police to report the bodies. According to a Facebook post made by a friend of the 3 men found deceased, multiple people had been trying to call Jordan in the days following the men's disappearance, and he even reportedly read messages from people looking for them, but he never responded. The entire time that his friends were dead in the backyard, he was alive inside of his home, and he even ignored another friend pounding on his door for 20 minutes trying to locate the men. According to police, a cause of death for the men has not yet been determined, as they're waiting on autopsy and toxicology results, which could take weeks. But they did state that there were no obvious signs of foul play, and because of this, Jordan has not been arrested or charged with a crime. According to Police Sergeant Jake Bacina, although Jordan was initially cooperative the night the bodies were found, he doesn't know why he never contacted police to report what happened. Regardless, Sergeant Bacina has stated, quote, "This case is 100% not being investigated as a homicide." End quote. This has obviously made friends and family of the victims furious. None of them believe Jordan's story, and they're demanding answers. As of right now, the case is still ongoing. A search warrant is in the process of being obtained for Jordan's home, and authorities have recovered all 3 of the victims' cell phones to go through to try and piece together what happened that night. This case is very odd, and adding to the mystery is the fact that none of Jordan's neighbors heard or saw anything suspicious that night or in the following days. As for Jordan, he has reportedly moved out of the home since the incident, and I'm not not sure if that's because he was forced to by police because it's considered a crime scene, or if his landlord evicted him because of the situation. Whatever reasoning he has not sat well with the public, and they think it's really suspicious. Jordan is a scientist working in experimental drug trials for HIV, and he's been described as incredibly intelligent but overall weird by the people that know him. Jordan also owns 2 dogs who he says are his life, and at this point, I'm not sure if the dogs were in the home while his friends' bodies were in the backyard, because if they were and he had taken them out, he would have for sure seen them, so that also adds to the mystery. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact 816-474-TIPS.
And that's the same person who pulled the trigger and took XXXTentacion's life. 28-year-old Michael Boatwright, along with Trayvon Newsome and Dedrick Williams, were found guilty for the murder of XXXTentacion on June 18, 2018. Surveillance footage captured these men blocking X's car as he tried to pull out from a motorcycle store parking lot. They came up to X's car and pointed a gun at him and then grabbed a bag full of money before shooting him. They took $50,000 in cash that X had just taken out that same day. This guy named Robert Allen was also involved in the murder and robbery, but he testified against the 3 other men in order to get a lighter sentence. I don't know how true this is, but Robert stated that him and his friends decided that they were going to rob on that day, so when they spotted X, that's when they decided to make him the target.
Craziest crimes of all time, Part 1. Travis Clark, a priest at a Catholic church in Louisiana, was recently arrested on charges of vandalism. And by vandalism, I mean that he did it with 2 dominatrixes on top of the altar. And according to recent reports, the altar has since been burned by the church. At least they were adults. William Dennis Bradley, a meth addict, murdered a man, and when arrested, told authorities that he had just killed the Terminator, and that they should be grateful. A Florida man was arrested for throwing an alligator through a Wendy's drive-through window. You know, I actually have a joke for this one, but it's kind of corny. See you later, alligator! A woman in Texas was arrested after trying to buy a mother's infant child for $500,000 in a Walmart checkout line. $500,000? Are you kidding me? Thank God my parents were offered. Hello? Hey mom, what's up? You have to tell me something? Uh-huh. In the 1960s, Charles Manson wanted to become involved in a cult. He declared Scientology was too crazy, so he started his own cult, the Manson family. It quickly grew to over 100 members who Charles would direct to commit vicious crimes. On the night of August 8th, 1969, 4 members of the Manson family are sent to break into the home of actress Sharon Tate and stab her repeatedly. At the time of her death, Sharon was pregnant with a child of Roman Polanski, and the Manson family took the lives of 4 of their close friends and various colleagues. The following day, the members killed Lino LaBianca and his wife, who together owned a local grocery store. This series of murders instantly gained public attention and caused mass hysteria in the community, with everyone wondering, could I be next? However, Charles and many of his cult members were arrested just a few days after the killings, with each of them being sentenced to life in prison for their crimes.
This is the story of Smile Dog. Back in 1992, an image was posted on a Chicago-based bulletin board system. The image was titled smile.jpg, and it's believed around 400 people saw it. Sometimes referred to as smile.dog or simply Smile Dog, the image allegedly shows a dog-like creature sitting in a dimly lit room. The dog itself is illuminated by the camera flash and has a huge grin on its face. It has 2 full rows of sharp, human-like teeth. Of the people who saw it in 1992, only one person, Mary E., has spoken openly about their experience. The rest have remained anonymous or are thought dead. The original image has been removed from the entire internet, leaving us only with artists' interpretations like this one. Mary E. claims that Smile Dog haunted her dreams for 15 years, and it spoke to her. She said she was told to spread the word by showing the image to other people. Anyone who didn't spread the word typically went missing, or like Mary E. took their own life. Do you want to see the original photo? Because I've got it. Make sure you spread the word.
So he joked about his wife on Family Feud and now she's dead. Rebecca Bleifnick was found deceased in her home with multiple gunshot wounds in Quincy, Illinois on February 23rd. She was 41 years old, a mother of 3 boys, and an award-winning nurse. She was found deceased by a family member in her home when she failed to pick up her 3 kids from school. At this time, Rebecca and her husband Tim had restraining orders against each other and were in the process of getting a divorce. Authorities spent weeks investigating the case and searched Tim's home home a week later before arresting him. The strange part about this that has many people invested in this case is a Family Feud episode that Tim was a part of in 2020. In the episode, Steve Harvey asked Tim, "What is the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?" And Tim responded with, "Saying I do to my wife." Even though this is odd now that his wife is dead, is it just a coincidence? Tim's attorney argues that the comment he made was just a joke and it's not relevant to their divorce and her murder. Tim is now facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and home invasion.
This is Slenderina. She is the ghost of a girl that lives in a basement. Her main purpose is to terrify those that see her frightening appearance. She has long black hair, bloodshot eyes, and a long bloody mouth. She is also known to wear a long white dress. Originally born in Norway, the girl came into the world with a subconjunctival hemorrhage. That means she was bleeding from a small blood vessel over the whites of her eyes. Being an outcast at school due to her ghostly appearance, Slenderina's parents made the decision to homeschool her. After Slenderina's father got into a lot of debt, people broke into the family home. They first killed Slenderina's sister by slitting her throat. Then they broke her father's neck. Slenderina ran to the basement where she had heard the screams, and was subsequently killed herself by the angry mob. As a result, Slenderina, her father Slenderman, and the rest of her family haunt and terrify anyone they see.
I think ghosts can help solve cold cases. Well, throughout history, there's been reports of ghosts coming back to tell their loved ones who killed them, like the story of Fred Fisher. And if you're interested in these kind of stories, I just did a podcast episode on the most famous one. So in 1826, an Australian man by the name of Fred Fisher disappeared into thin air. But this never sat right with his best friend John, because Fred seemed to have left in the middle of the night and didn't take any of his stuff with him. Fred's neighbor claimed that he had gone back to England and had named him the power of attorney. And then his neighbor starts selling all of Fred's stuff. So John starts thinking that something is not right. So one night, months later, John is walking down the street, he's had a few drinks, and right when he's passing Fred's property, he sees a ghostly figure standing in his yard. It looks exactly like Fred, but he's completely pale with like this dead stare. And the figure just lifts one hand slowly and points past John to a creek that's behind him. So the next day, John goes down to the creek right around where this apparition was telling him to go, and sure enough, he finds Fred's body. Not only did this ghost lead John to Fred's body, but it also led to the arrest of the sketchy neighbor for his murder. This full story and more this week on the pod.
The age of consent in America is 18 years old. Age of consent means the age you are legally allowed to engage in sexual activities.
This is TikTok famous creator Teacher Luke, and he's a hardcore pedophile. So before his arrest, Teacher Luke actually had 1 million followers here on TikTok. People came to him looking for advice on language, and they trusted him. He had a very likable personality. From the outside looking in, his life seemed perfect. That was until he was arrested last month in Thailand. So at the time of his arrest, Luke was actually in Thailand teaching young children how to speak English. This seemed to be going well for him until one of the children's mothers caught him doing something to her daughter. So at first the mother became concerned when she saw messages that were getting explicit between her young daughter and Luke. But eventually, after she reported him to authorities, this story took a gruesome and disturbing twist. Not only had Luke been engaging in inappropriate behavior with this child for months on end, he had actually been recording all of these encounters for his own sick personal satisfaction. And eventually, this whole story ended up unraveling because the mother's daughter came down with chlamydia and gonorrhea, which she had contracted from none other than Luke. I think that this whole story just makes that first initial clip so much more disturbing when you consider context. And this case obviously has yet to be resolved since it happened so recently, but he faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of a couple $100. And I'm really hoping that this sick freak gets put away for a while so he can't target other children.
So I was always under the impression that no one died at Disney. Like, I had heard the rumor that technically they don't pronounce people dead until they're outside of the park, that way they keep their squeaky clean reputation. But that is so far from true, and actually this law firm has a compiled list of all of the incidents. I'm going to show you some of them, but if you're interested in dark stories, I think you'll like the podcast. So in 1973, two young boys actually hid in the park until it closed. They wanted to explore Tom Sawyer's Island, but as they started swimming across, one of them started drowning. The other one actually tried to save him and got him over to land, but he himself drowned in the process. And then it was actually the next year that someone was crushed on the America Sings ride. She was working the ride and she slipped in between a stationary platform and a revolving wall, and then the wall started turning. The ride had only opened a week earlier, so they weren't sure if it was because they didn't train her properly. And this one sucks because it's actually one of my favorite rides, but in 2003, the Big Thunder Mountain ride actually malfunctioned, and over a bump, it went airborne. The whole coaster hit the ceiling of the tunnel they were in, and then it came forward and all of the back cars crushed onto the first car, crushing someone. And there's a bunch more, and this place actually has a whole timeline of events, so not only was I wrong, but I was very wrong, as you can see.
Just a month after this photo was taken, this girl was murdered. Ashley Doolittle was born in Louisville, Colorado. She was only 18 when she was killed. Her mum described how she was always worried about her getting into a car accident or hurting herself while riding horses, but she would never have imagined the tragic fate that met her daughter. Ashley and Tanner Flores had been dating for around a year. Prior to her death, the pair had been arguing a lot more than usual, and Ashley knew that she needed to speak to him about their relationship. They ended up breaking up, but Tanner seemed unable to accept this. On June the 9th, 2016, the pair met at Lon Hagler Reservoir to chat. However, Ashley's mum started to get really worried when her daughter didn't get home that night. Ashley was due to be home at around 7:30, and when she didn't show up, her mum actually went and looked for her. Worryingly, she found Ashley's car but no sign of her daughter. She rang police straight away and reported her missing. Tanner's family reported that they also hadn't been able to contact him since 3:30 that day. Terrifyingly, his dad reported that his gun was missing. Police obviously started a huge search, and a tip came in that led them to Tanner's deceased granddad's house. This was over 300 miles away. When they arrived, they made a grim discovery. Tanner's car was there, covered in blood. Ashley's body was inside, wrapped in blankets. She'd tragically been shot to death. Police managed to track down Tanner shortly after. Now, Tanner eventually admitted to killing the teenager, but insisted that it wasn't premeditated. His defense argued that it was a spur-of-the-moment thing, but why had he taken his dad's gun with him to meet Ashley? When questioned by police, Tanner said, "She just kind of glared at me and turned away, so I grabbed the gun and shot her. She started twitching and freaking out, so I shot her again. I thought it would be an instant thing." He was convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So this is somewhat old news by now, but EDP-445 was caught again in another sting for child predators. Except this time he was caught by two people that I actually frequently watch on YouTube, Skeet Hansen and Gideon. But let's go back in time a little bit and look at this situation. Looking back at it right now, it's kind of hard to believe, but there once was a time when EDP-445 was a beloved figure on YouTube. He made lots of comedy videos, his content was getting millions and millions of views, he had millions of subscribers, and he seemed like this really harmless Philadelphia Eagles sports fan that was always ranting about the games, making comedy videos. He couldn't have been more harmless. So rumors had been swirling around the internet for years that EDP was a hardcore pedophile. He'd messaged minors in the past asking them for help engaging in disturbing behaviors. He'd requested explicit photographs from minors. And those were all just rumors until EDP actually showed up to a To Catch a Predator type sting operation. And suddenly all those rumors were given validity. EDP was an actual pedophile. He had come to meet a minor alone, assuming that the minor was completely unguarded, and God knows what he exactly wanted to do that day with the child. So after all of this, EDP was canceled super hard. His channels were terminated. He lost all of his money. It was reported that he was living hotel to hotel. Hotels would kick him out once they figured out who he was. He couldn't get work. I mean, EDP's life just couldn't get any worse. But this guy could not possibly make the same mistake twice, right? Well, apparently he can, because just recently, Gideon and Skeet actually caught EDP attempting to meet another minor. I mean, this has to be one of the dumbest things that anybody has ever done in human history. This guy was shockingly and sadly making a small comeback here on TikTok. But just as soon as his life was getting just a tiny bit better, he screwed it up again. And I mean, this guy's life should be a living hell. This is the second time he's tried to meet a minor in person. He requested photos, images, all of that before. And I'm honestly just shocked that no arrest has been made yet. I think at this point there's definitely enough evidence that EDP is a predator, and I think he should be sent to prison. What do you guys think?
Stalked and murdered by her crazed ex-boyfriend, Molly McLaren was only 23 when her life was cruelly ended in a tragic and frenzied attack by someone she once trusted. Molly met Joshua Stimpson on a dating app in July 2016, and they exchanged messages back and forth before finally meeting face-to-face in November. Molly told friends that she had a connection with Joshua. She'd suffered from an eating disorder and anxiety for a number of years, and Joshua sympathised, saying that he too suffered from anxiety. During their relationship, Joshua's behaviour became more and more controlling, and he was trying to cut Molly off from her friends and family, so she eventually ended the relationship in June 2017. Joshua immediately took to social media, posting lies about Molly and tagging her friends and family to make sure that they saw his posts. Molly immediately blocked Joshua on all her social media accounts, but he continued the abuse over WhatsApp, and she